Hey, everybody, and welcome once again to the Fart Fetish Podcast. That podcast where we seek to find the answers to the what, where, how, and sometimes why of fart fetish, and try to give a nuanced picture of the people that have fetishes. I'm your host, Raj. Watch for new episodes every first Friday of the month on fartfetishpodcast.com, as well as most major podcast platforms. You can also support me and the show by checking out the ad-supported erotic fart content on thefartcloset.com. And now I'd like to introduce Piglet Aaron to the podcast. Piglet Aaron is a professional submissive at Sanctuary LAX and also enjoys a wide variety of kinks, including ABDL and pet play, as well as forms of edge play, including scat play. Piglet talks about degradation, fear, discomfort, and her embrace of certain kinks as a method of retaking control of difficult personal situations. She also reflects on how kink allows her to explore herself and helps others bring their fantasies to life in a safe environment. It's a great episode, so let's get right into the Fart Fetish Podcast. Thanks very much for being here, Piglet. Let's start with a little bit about yourself and the fetishes you have that you'd like to talk about today.
Ooh, okay. So I am Piglet Aaron. I work as a pro submissive at Sanctuary LAX. And some of my favorite kinks are ABDL, edge plays. A lot of the things that squick people out, I like trying them out. And pet play.
Very nice. Very nice. Do you know about how old you were when these fetishes started to come up for you? I'm assuming maybe at different times or maybe all at once. And how about was that or did those come about?
Okay, so I would say as early as elementary school. So one of the things about me is that I have bipolar disorder. And one of the symptoms that I deal with is hypersexuality. And so as a child, I was very sexual. I knew how to orgasm, and the riskier things got me off. So like exhibitionism, hurting myself. I love pain a lot, and pain would get me off a lot of the times.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I've not. I mean, I haven't dealt with. I haven't met too many people with bipolar disorder, but I did not know even that hypersexuality was a potential symptom or a potential outcome, I guess.
Yeah.
So you noticed all of those types of, I guess, play or kinks, even though they weren't kinks at that age, coming up for you in elementary school.
Yes, it was definitely elementary school. Um, okay, so it was back when there was like the first computers were coming out. Like I got like my first computer. It was like you had to like hook it up to like the landline and everything. And my cousins told me about LimeWire. I don't know if you know about that. We can just download things.
Absolutely.
Um, and then they showed me porn, and I was very, very interested in that. I know that. I got caught a couple times because I didn't have my own room, and so I was just watching porn in a shared room where there wasn't a lock on the door, so it was mostly just me listening out while also trying to watch porn.
Interesting. Interesting. Do you feel like that was part of the excitement for you? Like you didn't have a choice necessarily in where to watch porn, but that's a pretty high risk situation or like a high potential to get caught or seen. Or was this already happening with where people were visible, were seeing you?
So I do like public indecency. Not public indecency. I like public play. I don't like getting in trouble, but I do like the threat of getting in trouble.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually fairly um we'll get into CNC later, but I think that's a big element of CNC type player, consensual non-consent, for people who or may not be aware. Um, yeah, I think there's, and it's an important element too, of how to do this with the highest degree of imagined danger, I suppose, while still being totally free of actual danger, or free of risk, or free of criminal prosecution. What aspects or like themes do you think about when you are diving into your fetishes, or like fantasizing about your fetishes? What how do you explore them?
I like feeling uncomfortable. I like seeing how uncomfortable I can be, even like if that's like through getting squicked out with like scat play or like vomit play, or if that's getting like the adrenaline pumping from fear, from um, like I guess it could be like a chasing game, but like if you get caught, you like you kind of like get hurt a little bit, and I like that.
No, for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Do you find yourself always the submissive in most of your fantasies? Are you the dominant? Do you prefer both role? Do you have a tendency for both roles, or?
I have a tendency to bottom. I feel more comfortable in that headspace. Um, but I do top from time to time. I like to do I like hurting other people a lot, especially marks. I like seeing bruises.
Nice. Nice. How is it in the capacity as a professional, um and I'm assuming mostly bottom, like how does that typically go for you, or how do you enjoy that, I guess?
Oh, okay. So one of the things that I love about being like in the field of being a pro submissive is being able to like hear about other people's fantasies. I love hearing about like the like weird, or I don't call them weird, but I don't know if I would call them weird, but I like hearing about like the taboo things that like other people like, and I like making sure that they have like a safe place to communicate these things with. And I like making like these fantasies come to life.
That's really cool. That's really cool, and that really ties into what I was about to ask you is, do you have a fantasy scenario that, that something that you're comfortable sharing here, that like illustrates your fetishes and kinks the best, or like a perfect example of what you enjoy?
Ooh, okay, so I do have this one fantasy where so I role play as a pig. I'm Piglet, and I have a fantasy of being bacon, like being served up as bacon. I saw this missive Cupcake Sinclair, who I love, get eaten. Like she got a strip of flesh cut off, cooked, and eaten by someone. And I'm like, I'm bacon. I'm a pig. I would love to be eaten.
Yeah. That sounds, I mean, it sounds intense. I'm assuming there's a fantasy element to this strip of being cut off, but I could be wrong. I mean, I'm not sure. But certainly I agree with the potential for that being super hot. There's a lot of potentially dangerous play, that, you know, the safest we can achieve them is, you know, awesome, because sometimes they're limited to a story, or some kind of, professional set production or whatever, if it can be done. You mentioned about scat specifically. I think you've talked about, in our, previous interactions we have had about piss play. Um, what kind of things do or have your partner do when having that sort of play to ensure it's done safely in reality?
Mm. So some of the scenes that I've had are mostly. So I have Crohn's disease. So I have trouble with pooping on command. I don't like my own poop. I like other people's poop. And usually it's just smearing on skin. Um no real swallowing. But yeah, no real swallowing. I've never actually had it in my mouth. I've had it smeared on my skin. I've smeared it on other people's skin. And that's really the type of scat play I get into. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Well, that makes a lot of sense, and I think part of this question was supposed to be like logistics as well. Like, um, I remember I had a session with a pro dominatrix, and we had negotiated about potentially trying piss play, so that had come up. But moving from the bed to the tub, which is obviously more makes a lot more sense in terms of cleanliness and potential for cleanup. I think you kind of can lose that dominant vibe at the same time, in moving these logistics of the session. You're like, having to walk from the bed to the bathroom, unless maybe you're dragged there, by your hair or something. Maybe
Yes.
there's ways to keep
Making
it
it part
going.
of the scene.
That's true. That's very true. So I guess that's part of it too. Is like some of these plays have very specific either setup required or whatever that maybe takes
Yeah.
away some of the spontaneity. How do you feel? Do you feel like there's a way to get that back? Is it more just about the headspace of being a submissive that kind of lets go of some of the necessary setup elements?
One of the things is that making sure that you're set up before the play all starts, before you even get into that headspace.
Yeah.
Usually there's always the conversation about like what's comfortable, what's going to happen in the scene. And like while that's happening, that's when like you set everything up, make sure that you have your towels, your make sure that there's like a way for you to clean up quickly if anything goes wrong. There's also making sure that like like distress with the other person, like nonverbal cues really help when you're in a scene. Like making sure like you don't have to like constantly check in, but you still can like get across that like something's wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. There is a lot of, I think, when we're watching porn or other fantasy situations, I think there's a lot that goes unseen in how much precaution, setup, or whatever goes into a lot of this. And that's even for a production. There's maybe even more that goes into a private scene at a home situation, or at the dungeon with a partner or partners. I wanted to ask you one question that came up in my mind is, because you mentioned you like to role play as a piglet. Does
Yeah.
Is there like, I think the idea around pet play, or the thought in many people's mind, is tends to be actually tends I was going to say dog and cat, but even feels like it's very dog heavy. How do
Yeah,
you
dog heavy.
do you feel like there is a large segment, or a growing segment perhaps, of pet play furry people, furry players that are getting into alternative animals or alternative furry expression?
Ooh, okay, so one of the things that I also do is I'm like a spokespig for a pet play group actually called SoCal Creatures. And one of the things that I love is seeing all of the rare animals. So I've seen dragons. I've seen this duck. There is a duck that is the grumpiest little duck that I've ever seen and will crack at you at the quickest snap of a finger. And I like seeing those unique animals that you're not used to being able to see and pet play.
That's awesome. That's really great. I'm glad there is a a seemingly growing interest, or maybe it's always been there, interest in alternative expressions. We've talked to one one person on this show who identifies as a furry, as a fox. So there are
Nice.
definitely alternative expressions out there, but I do recognize too, like having gone in the community, there is quite a few dogs, and nothing against dogs. Dogs are great, but it's just um, it seems almost default. Maybe it's a starter animal in some ways, a starter pet. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there's usually people start off as a dog. Um, that's usually that's the most common animal. And within like having being a dog, there's different breeds, and that's how people like do their own personalities, like bring their own personalities to the pet. Is like having different breeds, really fleshing out the character. Um, and then from there, a lot of people like will get into like primal play. And while there are like a lot of dogs, it gets more into like prey animal and predator. And so that's when people get into more of like wolves. And then people spread out to like, oh, I think maybe I like being like taken care of and like being petted and like just napping. And there are dogs that do that, but I feel like cats really are able to really get into that headspace of I love napping and you should take care of me.
For sure. That is definitely, without a doubt, the cat personality. I cannot. I have a cat myself, so definitely see that. Uh, Going back to the scat element, or the aspect, but really I was curious about um farting in that sense, because obviously, that being the more generalized subject of this podcast, do you feel
Yeah.
like in your interest of scat, like farting was a skip step, or do you have a mild interest in farting, and what does that difference look like or feel like in your mind?
Hmm. So with the Crohn's disease, I have like this unique experience, I would say, in which I fart a lot. Everything's about that digestion tract. Everything's about poop. Everything's about all those taboo subjects. And so I've gotten interested in them because like they're a daily part of my life, and it was either just have to like be icked out about it for the rest of my life, or like find a way to like incorporate it into more of my life. So with flirting, I do kind of like the aspect of like having smelly forts or having like loud forts. And then like sometimes like with my partners will become like a game of like who can fort the loudest, or like who's have like the smelliest forts.
Sure, sure. Do you feel of your I mean, it seems like you have quite a few, maybe primary kinks, and then also like secondary, or maybe ways to enjoy some of the kinks more specifically. Do you find any of these fetishes and kinks work better combined, or do you feel that some are a single activity that you'd only want to do that in specific times?
Mm. For me, I like combining a lot of the times. So I'm into ABDL. I'm into pet play. So I will like mix those two together. I would be a baby animal. And I would like need to be taken care of by like the big animal. Um, and then other ways, sometimes it's just about the person. So, like about the other person and about the other person's kinks. And I know everyone doesn't have the same kinks. Everyone doesn't have a lot of kinks. Some of them are like separate. And so sometimes it really depends on who I'm playing with and what they're comfortable with.
Nice. Nice. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, especially as a pro submissive, that makes sense, and then especially with partners, that makes sense as well. Um, really finding, I mean, I've had trouble, uh, you know, definitely finding people who are interested in doing the farting aspect, and then sometimes finding someone who's also dominant or wants to be dominant or can be dominant,
Yeah.
can be equally hard. So it's almost like two uh, very separate and very difficult fetishes to get met by um, random people. I think that's why a lot of people turn to pro dominatrix, which is great. It's a great option to have, but difficult to find a relationship that maybe can satisfy that type of more specific need.
Hmm. That is very true. Because as a pro submissive, one of the things that I like doing is expanding my experiences and making sure that I can cater to like multiple kinks and making sure that I know different kinks and like I can communicate with people about their different kinks. And so I like to study different kinks a lot of the time. I like to play like outside of the pro world. I like to play with other people just to like build up my experiences of like being able to do it in a professional setting. I want to actually build up these skills so when I do it professionally, I can actually do it in a professional way.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Like I mean, you want to be good at your job essentially. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, very understandable. You as we've talked in the past, you've mentioned enjoying like the kind of degradation element.
Yeah.
What what do you what is it like? What do you think about what it is about those aspects that you feel like you enjoy, or what you're trying to um, feel when you think about being or are being essentially degraded um, or humiliated? I'm not sure, which aspect you lean more towards. What place do you go to in your head, and why do you think you want to go there? I guess is a simpler way to ask.
Hmm. So I know for me that when I try to do humiliation and degradation scenes, a lot of the times I enjoy it too much, I guess you would say. Um, for me, it's like a way to role play a different perspective, a different experience that I could have in life. I like doing different experiences. And sometimes I find it funny to be degraded. Um, and other times, I do like the seriousness of it. I do like having that fear is really what comes down to it when being degraded is that spontaneity. Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
i like I like the fear. I like the unpredictableness of it.
Nice, nice, and that I presume uh, ties into enjoying aspects of like consensual non-consent.
Yes,
Is that right? Okay,
I
and
do like
yeah, no, as do I. What does CNC mean for you, and perhaps like how does it play out? You've given us a few examples, but maybe one that's more specific to CNC.
that. So, hmm, This is kind of like really personal and like kind of triggering, but I was sexually assaulted as a child. And so sometimes what I like to do is to replay these scenes, but from the viewpoint and perspective that I can change it whenever I want. So I get that feeling of being in control of the scene and being in control of the actions and what's going on, but still I do like the unpredictableness and sometimes of being in CNC. But still I'm always in control by being able to stop it whenever I want.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's I appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that, because it is very that's it really speaks to you know the very, I guess, deep meanings or deep reasons why people get into these plays that have a lot of negative aura around them. That's really why I want to talk about this and enjoy bringing this up. As a CNC fan myself, as someone who enjoys like cruel domination, fantasy torture or what have you, in my own fetishes. Uh, I you know one I seek or want to find the validation that it's okay, because I have these thoughts, and I think that as long as it's done safely and consensually and all these things, that it can be okay. um
Yeah.
but I really want other people to realize that, as well as that, to try to lift kind of the negative cloud around around CNC, and kind of break away some of the fear, the otherization that maybe happens in the kink community, perhaps unintentionally. I sometimes think about too the maybe it's not a positive for the negative connotation, but um I sometimes think, in as someone who is also into humiliation, degradation, consensual non-consent, I think about the mental health side of it as well. um do you think about the conflict between the desiring to be degraded as a form of intimacy versus what might be, quote unquote, good for our mental health? And if so, what are your thoughts?
Um, so I'm really big into mental health. I'm getting to the field of behavioral therapist. So social and emotional field is like what I really am interested in, and that aspect of being able to regulate your own emotions and that ability to communicate with other people and being able to connect with other people. So for me with kink, that's a way to really, really like challenge your social emotional skills, because it is you basically saying, hey, this is the thing that I really like, but I'm also, a lot of people are really scared to talk about this because it's not something that, because it is something that you can get pushback from people, and some people are not receptive to kink. And so it can be a place of fear. It could be a place of you really having to use your skills and socializing and connecting and communicating your needs. Because not only do you have to communicate your needs of what you want in the scene, but you also have to communicate what you need outside of the scene. So a lot of the times in scenes, you're degraded. You are treated meanly, and like you like it in the scene. But then outside of the scene, you can have different feelings. You can have other feelings. And you also have to communicate with your partner about what you need in those moments too.
Yes. No, it's very true. It's partially what I find so appealing about kink. I mean, obviously I've had these interests Well, maybe not obviously, but I too have had these interests since kindergarten at least. So it's always kind of been a part of me. But what has appealed to me about the community, similar to the appeal of the poly community, is the high priority put on communication.
Mhm.
Um, it's surprisingly not, uh, you know, I think it's spoken to be a high value in monogamy, but it doesn't seem to be practiced nearly enough, or it's practiced by, you know, the partners who are very mindful and conscious of it. But I don't think it's like taught or expected in a way that it is in kink and poly, as it were.
Mhm.
Would you say you're pretty public or private about your fetishes? Like if sexuality comes into a conversation you're having in vanilla or mixed company, like would you talk about it?
For me, I would talk about it, but I would also have the talk about if that person is comfortable with sharing about like sexual things because for me, kink is sexual. There's other aspects of it for me that aren't sexual, but a lot of the times it is sexual. And I don't like talking about sex with everyone. Everyone's not cool with talking about sex. And so I first have that conversation about if they're open to talking about sexual things. I'm cool with saying that like my job field is a pro submissive. Like getting into more details, I would have the talk.
For sure. For sure. I tend to do that in the same way about this podcast, in a similar way. I try to tell people, or try. I tell people I'm host a sexual and fetish podcast. And,
Mhm.
because I don't think the name is invasive. I don't think it's too much to put on someone to tell people the name, but I would rather they ask or have further interest before I, tell them essentially what the title or the show is more specifically about, because I think it's almost like a filtering mechanism, as it were. It's like, oh, you heard sexual and what do you think when you hear sexual and fetish? What does the person think? And I think their question or their lack of question um, can be an indication, I suppose.
Yeah.
Do you find there's any unique struggles you've noticed with the fetishes and kinks you've enjoyed?
Do you know that so I'm poly, I have multiple partners, and one of the things is that I don't share all of my kinks with all of my partners. We have different likes, different interests with each other, different things that we do with each other. And sometimes a boundary a partner would have is that I wouldn't talk about a different kink because like it squicks them out or like they just don't like it. And during those instances, I'm cool with not sharing my kinks with each individual person.
Sure, that makes sense. How do you go about finding kink play partners for the particular fetishes you have?
Ooh, okay, so one thing I do is I go to munches. I go to play parties about these different kinks where I'm able to meet people who I already know just from going to this party are into the kink. I like meeting people in person at parties, really. Yeah, that's how I meet most of my partners is at different parties in LA.
That's great. That's awesome. That works. That you can find people that you both jive with and share your kinks out in the community. That's awesome. That's great to hear. And I'm sure people are interested or want to know how people connect um, with people, and that's a great tip for sure.
Yeah, I go to dungeons around SoCal.
Nice, nice.
Like Threshold and Sanctuary LAX.
For sure, for sure. Which is where you are employed. It's like the latter.
Yes,
Nice,
yes, Sanctuary
nice.
LAX.
Very cool. Did you grow up with any media that had like hints or like a bit of like touches of your fetishes in them, like whether it was a small way or a larger focus of the content? And were any of those like formative experiences?
I would say a lot of music videos gave me ideas. Um, I feel like a lot of music really talks about kinks. I know one song that really stands out to me is called Simp. And it's basically a story about how this one simp is what they're called, a person, a man, who really loves this other woman and would do whatever she wants for her, no matter what, just whatever she wants. And like they have like this guy and all rubber at one point on the floor like a dog, and like those are some of the things that I really like.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I hadn't thought about music videos, but yeah, that's true. They probably have explored a lot of different sexual explorations in music videos.
Mhm. Ooh, then like for APDL, there is a Melanie Martinez. Has a whole album in which it's really has like a lot of elements of H play in it.
Yeah, hopefully we'll hear more from other people as well who've been perhaps inspired or formed or had their fetishes like awakened perhaps by music videos. Because yeah, that is not one I have heard on the show thus far, but or in my travels, as it were. But that is very interesting. Would you say you enjoy having your fetishes?
Definitely. Um, I enjoy I enjoy learning about myself a lot. I'm really into self help. I'm really into learning exactly what makes me tick. And that for me are kinks, are fetishes like ABDL and pet play and scat and piss play. And so for me, exploring them is exploring myself. And that's what I want to do with my life, explore myself.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I really appreciate the or I I guess I vibe with people on the journey of self-discovery and growth and just a continued um mission of finding themselves or ourselves or who however um it's yeah, that's really awesome, and I really appreciate. We're coming to the close of our time here, but I really appreciate you um, coming on and sharing your perspective with me. What are your thoughts on the future of kink and fetish, whether it be for yourself or the greater community, or both?
Mm, my thoughts are that it's continually growing and it's becoming more mainstream with like different shows now about um like 50 Shades of Grey really opened up. I don't like it. I don't like 50 Shades of Grey, but I do like how it did open the dialogue of kink and of fetish into the more mainstream world. And I feel like more people are getting comfortable with exploring this type of journey, this type of experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We continue to grow, and hopefully, we continue to stay by the practice of making sure everything's consensual, making sure everything's as safe as possible. As long as you consent and no permanent harm. Well, no, permanent harm is okay for me. I would say consensual and as safe as possible for the people involved.
Absolutely. No, that's great. That's a great place to end us. I really appreciate you taking the time, Piglet, for coming on and talking to us. Um uh is if people wanted to find you or reach out to you, is there any means to do that online?
Yeah, So I'm on Instagram as little_piglet_Aaron. And I'm really on Twitter a lot at Piglet Aaron. Yeah, you can find me there. Or you can come to Sanctuary. I'm there a lot. I go to a lot of the parties.
Nice. Nice. That sounds awesome. I really thank you. Thank you once again, Piglet. I'll talk to you again soon, all right?
Thank you. Bye, Raj.